Welcome back to the Road to National series. In today's episode, I'm going to take you through a deload lower workout. So my first main movement for this deload lower workout, I decided to do 2 sets of 5 at 150 kilos on a safety squat bar squats. Now, I did do 2 sets of 5. Unfortunately, I didn't record the first set, but you're just going to have to trust me. I actually did do 2 sets. So they moved well and were at a sort of appropriate weight. I often try and pick things around 70% of my 1 rep max, which that was there, and just get a few reps in on my deload weeks, still doing a bit of a primary movement, but just not pushing hard. Obviously, it would normally be max or dynamic efforts where I'm trying to use like 100% effort. So just having something moderately heavy, still getting the blood flowing and everything moving well on the deload weeks is how I like to start my sessions off. Then the first accessory, they're all sort of accessories on deload week, but the first exercise of like lighter accessories here was GHDs here into hip extensions. So I decided to superset these just as something fun to sort of do. Now, I think I'm only going to do 1 lower deload session this week. There's a few reasons for that. Life has just been getting in the way and I've got a few other commitments over the weekend. So it's a time thing. I also allowed my lower dynamic session from last week to spill into this week. I did the same thing last deload week 4 weeks ago and only did 1 deload workout like this, and it turned out really well. I've then hit a load of great max effort PRs and just had a general really good 3-week cycle. So I don't think only doing 1 lower deload workout's too much of an issue, particularly because lower workouts in general, obviously you're much stronger with your lower body, so you do way more volume and just loads throughout it. So when deloading, I feel like I can easily do 2 upper deload sessions and feel fully recuperated versus 1 lower session often feels better. So that's why I'm doing that this week, but also that led me to decide to do a variation that's sort of like a hamstring curl with these GHDs and then into hip extension so that I'm hitting both those movements, because normally in my other session is when I would do hamstring curls. So that's why I decided to do this sort of mini little superset, and it was good. I actually pumped up particularly my lower back loads in these hip extensions. The one thing I did find was, you'll see I use a bit of a extra padding for the GHDs. That is because it is just really uncomfortable on my machine without it. It doesn't make it any easier or anything. It's just to help make sure that my quads aren't digging into where the metal bends, but it's more of a nightmare to try and do hip extensions off that. So that's why I wasn't pushing very hard. I could have done way more, but still got blood flowing. I actually did, like I say, pump up my lower back particularly a lot in those hip extensions, and I have a device I've got a local welder to make to help overload hip extensions. So my main hip extension movement I've been doing has been good mornings. I built them up to 180 kilos for sets of 5, which I think is like the most I could do now. I think now is time in my next cycle to switch up the exercises to do heavy hip extensions as soon as I've got that device. So that was another reason why I did hip extensions here. I think deload weeks are a great opportunity to test out exercises that you might want to put into your rotation in your next block. So hip extensions and heavier hip extensions are definitely something I think I'm going to include. So moving on to the next accessory here, I just did classic quad extensions. Now I've been doing single leg quad extensions all through this week, but I find them more challenging, and for the deload I just wanted to do some easy dual leg quad extensions. So I did 2 sets of 15 at 100 pounds. Now this also marks huge improvements in my quad strength. I mean, 100 pounds used to be my working weight for like sets of 10, and that was basically pushing to failure, and I did 2 really easy sets of 15 there with it. So the quad strength definitely is coming along in spite of the knee injury that I've been working through. I've mentioned that loads throughout this series, but it really is, I'm like so happy that my quad strength is coming back. It is very debilitating having your knee not primed, and it still sort of affects some of my squats. I'm aware of it, and the knee's often a bit stiff, but the pain has gone so much, and the knee is so much stronger and more ready to train. So yeah, very happy with that. Then the next accessory here, I just did one set of 20 on calf raises. So I pushed these quite hard. Calves are something that even on deload weeks, I feel like I can give a load of punishment to. They never seem to be a problem. I think I could train calves like 4 or 5 days a week and it wouldn't be an issue. So I'm not going to, because calves are not overly important in powerlifting. I do find that they are good, particularly if you're off balance. If you misgroove like a squat and you're going forward, I do drive into the ground with the balls of my feet and it stops me from falling over forwards. So I do like to train the calves as well. And as I've mentioned in a few other videos, I just like to be a well-rounded athlete and try and train often things that other powerlifters don't. Case in point, this next accessory here, I'm doing hip abductions, which many people neglect. I did these for sets of 12, 2 per side. Now, for the first sets, I did 30 pounds here, but that was actually quite challenging. It looks like I'm moving the weight really slowly and controlled, which I guess I am, but it was also significantly more challenging than it looks. I was sort of trying to attack the weight on the way up, and I just realized for a deload week, like I had huge soreness in the outside of my glutes, in the abductors, after that first set. So I was like, just be sensible. It's a deload week. I would, if it was a normal working week, do another set of 12 per leg. But honestly, I think that would have been like redlining and have been very close to failure if I tried to do that in the second set. So that's why I dropped it down to 20 pounds, just trying to get blood flowing. And yet the hip abductions in general felt very good. And I'd like to include this variation of hip abductions in my training more, this cable variation. So most people, if they're doing hip abductions, are probably doing them with a machine or cable in a gym. However, I don't have room for the machine, and my cable stack, I just haven't had that little attachment that's going around my ankle. I bought one of the Velcro ones, but it kept just like breaking and coming undone. It's made for people with absolutely tiny ankles, so the Velcro wasn't really attaching properly around mine. It kept coming undone. So I've been doing banded abductions. If you followed the series, that is my main variation for abductions, but those cable ones felt really good. Having uniform tension throughout the movement was very nice, and I'll still rotate in banded hip abductions and adductions, but having the uniform tension of a cable, the same resistance the whole way through the range of motion, is quite nice as well. So the final accessory here was hip holds. These are just something that I've been doing. They're a nice little isometric. They are surprisingly challenging, particularly because my glutes were feeling quite fatigued from the hip extensions earlier. I mentioned my lower back feeling fatigued, but the glutes definitely were as well. So the standing leg, the glute is almost having to do like a hip thrust to stop you from caving forward. And then obviously the raised leg, the working leg, is contracting the hip flexor and trying to hold that upper leg at 90 degrees. I'm basically trying to kick my knee up as high as possible and hold it. This is just as high as I'm strong enough to go. I literally can't go any further. And then there's a bit of a tibialis raise as well from the raised foot holding the kettlebell up. If I was to relax that front foot, it would start to flop towards the ground and the kettlebell would roll off. So there is also a minor, tiny little tibialis raise in there as well. So these felt really good. Again, just training things that people normally aren't, but I think it is important to try and be a well-rounded athlete and be strong in every single sort of direction, every way that you can be, every joint action. So that is also why I'm doing this. You never know what you could like strain just because it's very physically unprepared. I could be doing something out of the gym, like getting involved in football or something, and then strain my hip because I've never trained it. So that's what I'm trying to avoid here. So that is it for today's video. I hope you did in fact enjoy the video. If you did, drop it a like, drop it a comment, subscribe, click the bell, all that good stuff, and I hope you have a great day.